But yeah, we'll get started. So we're here today to talk about the Hurricane Francine dashboard that ViaLink launched, and also to talk about some upcoming hurricane dashboards that we're going to be sharing with the public, and just some other data tools that we want to make sure everybody's aware of. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. I'll just talk quickly about, I think most people here are familiar with ViaLink, but just talk about our data work a little bit and how we got into this space of publishing disaster data and why we think that that's important. And then I'll walk through our Hurricane Francine dashboard and its functionality and field any questions y'all have. And then I'll turn it over to my coworker, Jack, who's going to talk about the external data that we used and how you all can access that data for other projects. And then finally, we'll talk about some additional 4 new hurricane dashboards that we're going to be releasing in the coming weeks. So just a quick who we are. My name's Andrew Holbein. I'm with ViaLink as the Vice President of Data and Resource Development, and we have Jack Bigelow, who's a data analyst for us and who does the heavy lifting on building out these dashboards. So about ViaLink, we're a 501c3 human services nonprofit. We're based in Greater New Orleans, and our biggest service area is that we run a crisis contact center, and that's staffed by about 50 call specialists. And they're, highly trained. A lot of them have masters in social work or masters in counseling, and they're providing 24/7 support to our region, answering the 211 system, the 988 system, and about 25 other health and human services, mental health crisis, post-disaster lines. So really answering kind of the region's major lines for phone, text, and chat lines for those things. And then we also have homeless services. We offer care navigation. We run Prevent Child Abuse Louisiana, and a handful of other services. So in terms of data, we started publishing data in 2019 using dashboards. And we were doing that because we collect a lot of data at our contact center. And I think that 211 data specifically is really unique because it gives real-time data about what the needs of people in the region are. Our dashboards are updated daily, and there you can look at needs and unmet needs, and you can overlay our extensive resource database over some of those needs to look, see gaps in services, and you can look at it, by demographic and by time. So it's really rich data. I'll just give a quick, share of. This is vialink.org, our website. And so these are all of our public facing dashboards. You can see the Hurricane Francine dashboard here, but these dashboards are really rich, showing things like the needs of our callers and unmet needs, and just, some examples of how these tools could be used. Like we know that foundations use this dashboard, looking at what needs we couldn't assist our callers with, and why we couldn't, to sort of see what areas might need additional funding in our region. Or like we have our COVID-19 dashboard. The city of New Orleans was using this dashboard in the early days of COVID to figure out where to place their mobile testing sites based on where we were having people calling us saying that they're symptomatic. Or like Second Harvest was using our original Hurricane Ida dashboard, which was updating multiple times a day with the tens of thousands of calls we were getting after Hurricane Ida to figure out where to place their mobile food distribution sites and things like that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use this data. And why did we start getting into disaster data? So at first we were just publishing our ViaLink data, and that was being used a lot, but we saw after Hurricane Ida that the lack of available disaster data out there was really, creating sort of challenges. I'll never forget a conversation that I had with one of the big funders for the region, and it was the gentleman who was in charge of deciding how to allocate the funding that they had based on parish. And he was saying, I don't really have any data to go off of to decide how to allocate the money. So I'm just kind of doing the best I can with what I'm hearing from community members. And obviously listening to the community is the best thing to do. But if he had really good data, especially FEMA data available to him, that could have helped him figure out, how can I allocate my resources in the most efficient way? Or like I remember talking with organizations that had case managers who were thinking the same thing of like how, where should I be having my case managers working geographically, but they didn't have good data to sort of base those decisions off of. So we saw that as a real gap, that if we could help the community get good data to help sort of guide this decision making, that it could improve planning and it could improve resource allocation. So that's how we started with our Hurricane Ida dashboard. And the good thing about it is that it took a lot of work to build that dashboard, but then it created a template that we can now use for future disasters and previous disasters and launch quickly after them. So I'll jump now into looking at the dashboard that we built for Hurricane Francine. So you can access it again by going back to viewlink.org and clicking on that. So when it launches, it takes you to this nice cover page, and you can click on this button if you wanted to get a tutorial later. But here you can just click around to learn about VLink and to view the different types of data that we have on this website. So the FEMA data that's very rich, and Jack's gonna in a bit walk through the sources for these data. But so if you then click on these navigation pages down here, this page takes you to the main data page, and you can look at a number of different maps. So right now this is looking at the individual assistance data that FEMA gives out. So the individual assistance is like the payments that we as individuals would receive from FEMA after disaster. And there's a few different categories here of that. This is total individual assistance, but you can look at other needs assistance, housing assistance, and rental assistance. So you see the map here. These are the designated parishes. So you can hover over them to see the exact values. The darker blue, the more funding that was given to that area. So you can look at it by parish, or you can click here to view it by zip code. And then we know that something that's also important is that if you look at just total amounts, oftentimes that'll skew towards more highly populated areas, especially if you look at like our dashboard for Hurricane Ida. You can see that the most money was given to Jefferson Parish and Orleans. But we also think it's important to look at it at a per 1,000 people basis. So it's more kind of apples to apples of how much was given out per resident that lives there. And when you do that, you can see that the map looks a little more like the pathway that the hurricane took. So you can look at it in those different ways, or you can switch to looking at different types of assistance that were available. And then you can look at it side by side with other types of maps. So this is showing really good data about private insurance claims that were made, like homeowners insurance claims or auto insurance claims for flooded cars and things like that. And then as you click on the top, you can see other types of data. So this is flood payment data. And you can see here, it's easy to notice that Jefferson Parish had the most flood assistance because of the overtopping of the canals that they saw during the storm. And then you have the public assistance data, which is the larger money that's given out by FEMA to like municipalities and parish governments for things like debris removal and road repair and longer term facility repairs. And then we have the social vulnerability index data. This is data from the CDC that sort of talks about the vulnerability of residents. And again, you can see the insurance claims data. So all of this, these are the main, it gives summaries of these data points. And we're updating this weekly from the Open FEMA website. So we have all this data inside of our SQL server and, just have it connected here. And so it updates weekly, and the dashboards are updated to reflect that. So then we tried to get into some analysis here. One of the big stories coming out of Francine, which was obviously not as big a hurricane as we've seen at times, but this is looking at the flooding in Jefferson Parish. You can select which map you want to view. Looking at this is total flood claims, but then you have building claims and content claims. This is the two ways that flood insurance is broken up. So you can look at it that way. And then you can get more kind of granular about the types of payments and looking at it by zip code, and then you can also see the flood zones for the different houses in the area. Then we have our storytelling page. So this talks about the path of the hurricane, and you can change the map underneath it to look at the population or different indicators of wealth and vulnerability. Here's a story. So something that we were also proud of during this storm is that ViaLink formed a partnership with Airbnb, where we worked with them to identify residents whose homes were damaged by the storm and needed short-term housing while they either moved to a new home if they were renters or worked to fix their homes. So we formed this partnership where our care navigation team at ViaLink was identifying callers who called in through the 211 system who needed that type of support, and we were linking them up with Airbnb stays, and that went really well. It was the first time that Airbnb had done that kind of partnership with a 211 agency, and it went so well that we ended up connecting them with our sister agencies in Florida and North Carolina for Hurricanes Helene and Milton, and we're poised to revive that partnership here in Southeast Louisiana if we have a hurricane this hurricane season. And then the final story and trends we're looking at here is vulnerable residents. What we really saw from the thousands of calls that were coming in through the 211 system, that to me, the biggest takeaway is that for hurricanes, unless you're going to have levees breaking, the biggest danger that I see comes in the days after the storm when there's power outages and you have elderly residents or residents who rely on medically charged devices, and figuring out how to, assist them and ensure that they have water and ensure that their medical devices are working. That to me, that's the biggest unmet need that we've seen after hurricanes, and something that I think deserves, a closer look by a whole bunch of agencies. Then the last page on this dashboard is our resource databases. So there's 7 different organizations that provide 211 services in Louisiana. ViaLink has this area of Southeast Louisiana, but then there's 232 Help, which is out of Lafayette. So this is looking at the parishes that were given individual assistance by the storm, and so it's the different colors show which 211 provider covers their area. And then a 211 provider is required to have a very extensive database of resources available. So we wanted to allow users of the dashboard, say that a caseworker was looking at this for data, so that they could also see that, ViaLink, if they're working in Jefferson Parish, okay, ViaLink's the 211 provider for that area, and I can click here to jump and look at ViaLink's resource database online. And there you can go, there's all these in the guided search, there's lots of different categories of assistance. Say that I was, working with somebody who really needed food assistance. So I would go in here and select food pantries and my zip code. And then it starts giving out lots of different organizations that you can go to for assistance. And I could, if I'm the case manager, I could email this information to the person I'm working with, or I could text it with them. I could click on here and view more information about the agency, and I could translate it. If I was working with a Vietnamese caller, I could translate it into Vietnamese and then text them the translated version so that they can, get the assistance that they need. So that's the link to the resource databases, so you can help people find long-term assistance who are impacted by these storms. So yeah, that's the overview of our dashboard. We also have one for Hurricane Ida that's laid out in a very similar way that you can access through the website. So I'll jump back into the PowerPoint, and I'm going to hand it over now to Jack Bigelow, who's going to talk through these sources of data that we are pulling from.
Yeah, so I guess real quick, just to address a question that was in the chat, we use Power BI to create the dashboard. We also use SQL Server to store most of the data, like the FEMA data specifically. And then our resource database is in a program called Sophia, which is used for running resource databases. But yeah, so FEMA, They offer pretty much all of their data, all their historic data, online on their website, OpenFEMA. And FEMA has done a great job collecting and archiving all of this data that they've collected. I think the flood data goes back to 1978. So a very extensive, long-running list of data. The only, I wouldn't say issue, but the hard part with their data is it's so vast that it's difficult for the lay person to be able to actually open the data. You can download it, but it's hard to process. So that's why we import all of that data into our SQL Server, and then subsequently into Power BI, which allows us to more easily process and view and use the data. Um, and then our insurance claim data, we received that from the Louisiana Insurance Commissioner's Office. That data is a little harder to obtain, not because it's hard to get, but because it's not as put out there as maybe some of the other data. In terms of Francine, we had to reach out to the insurance commissioner's office for them to give us the data. But some of the other ones, like Hurricane Ida, they put on their website, which is what the link on the screen you see now is. And that data was available for anyone to download. And it's definitely more extensive. The Feeding America data is data collected by Feeding America that kind of covers, they mainly look at food insecurities on local areas, to kind of gather and estimate the overall food insecurities based off of, just any sort of insight or any sort of points that they can look at, of like how far a grocery store might be from a place or how many grocery stores there are in the area and things of that nature. And they also look at child food insecurity rates. And then last, the social vulnerability index. As Andrew stated before, it's a list of reasons why an area might be considered more vulnerable than another, based off of various different factors like socioeconomical, or demographic, or such things as, like Louisiana is obviously more vulnerable in certain areas because of hurricanes, and different things of that nature. And the social vulnerability index data is also available for anyone to find and download online themselves, and you can look at that data both by county level and census tract level. I think that kind of covers all of those. I don't know if you have any other thing, Andrew, or if not, I'll pass it back to you.
No, yeah, that covers it well, Jack. So just jumping to the last point. So we know that people are interested in historic data about different hurricanes, and that this data really has never been published before in a way that's easily accessible and able to explore through these type of visualization tools. So in the coming weeks, we're going to be launching 4 new dashboards that show the historic data for Hurricanes Katrina, Laura, Gustav, and Rita. We'll be sending an email out about that, and they'll be posted on our website as well. And so, our goal just kind of going forward is to expand the amount of data tools that we have available to the public. Another role that I am in is that I'm the president of the Louisiana statewide VOAD. And so in that role, I really want ViaLink and Louisiana VOAD and our sister agency, LIPA, which covers government agencies and for-profit agencies, to really work together to expand the tools that are publicly available. I think that Louisiana can really become an example of how disaster data can be used for decision making. So I think we can really be a national leader in that space. So I'd love to keep pushing us towards that. I'll also say ViaLink, we've had a number of organizations come to us and say we want to start having these tools. We want to have dashboards and things like that. And so we've taken our dashboards and changed them and made them dashboards for other organizations with their branding that sit on their website. So if you're interested in building that capacity, feel free to reach out to me. We can chat more about that. So yeah, now I'll jump off sharing my screen and just open it up to any questions to see if anyone has questions before we give you back some of your day. Looks like Cheryl, will the system be updated throughout the disaster? Yeah, so we plan to launch this, as I said, for future hurricanes, and we will continue to set refreshes on those dashboards so that they update weekly as often as FEMA updates their data. It usually takes a few weeks for after disaster for the data to be populated, because obviously it takes time for assistance to actually start being given out. But we'll launch dashboard as soon as that is done. Yeah, the first time when we built the IDA dashboard, it took us about a year and change to get the dashboard up because there was just so much involved in it. And then for Francine, it took about 5 months after the disaster. But now at this point, we can launch really immediately after a disaster. So the flood data is from Open FEMA. So that's all of the data in Open FEMA is de-identified data, but they do have all of their flood claims data going back, as Jack said, to 1978. So there's a ton of data, and you can download it as Excel files, though the challenge is, as Jack said, that there's so much data in there. There's like 20 million rows of data that you can't actually open it with an Excel file on your laptop, because that's usually limited to 1 million rows. So that's one of the reasons why this data is challenging, as Jack said, for kind of non-data people to access, and we wanted to put it out there. But yeah, you can get the flood data as it's as a CSV file off of Open FEMA. Looks like Jean's typing something, so I'll just wait another minute for her to finish typing. So Jean says that her specific work is with people with disabilities and older adults. Does Social Vulnerability Index data or any other database provide specific information or group about how this group was affected? I will follow up with you. That's an interesting question. Social Vulnerability Index, Jack, do they have, you want to jump in on that, Jack?
So they have multiple, as I stated before, they have multiple different categories. When we were looking at it and we just saw index, that's the most broad category that they have. And then it kind of breaks down from there. There's socioeconomic, there's household characteristics, racial and ethnic, and housing type and transportation. And within that household characteristics, it does look at things such as age, disability, single parent housing, and English language proficiency. So it looks at folks with disabilities, but again, it does the same of kind of just putting out a number of how vulnerable they might be because of that. So it doesn't necessarily expand upon anything further than that, but I guess it would still give you a good indication of like if a particular parish might have more, people with disabilities, then it would be considered more, vulnerable.
Yeah, and one other dashboard that VLink has that I'll draw your attention that can shed some light on that. So if you look at exploring our data and the caller needs data, there's an ability to filter that data by demographics. So we try and capture as much demographics information as we can about our callers. Obviously, that's not always going to be appropriate if it's, a mental health crisis call, but we try and collect as much data as we can. And so you can, if you wanted to look at the data just with the needs of people who are disabled, say, and seniors, you can look to see like what needs they have, and you can filter it by time or by, I don't know data for that time range, but you can look at it by parish. So you can kind of get into understanding what the needs of people over time in specific groups are. Also, the unmet needs dashboard that I showed is valuable for that. So that's some insight. You could look at the needs of disabled or elderly residents for a specific time period, looking at it for a disaster. Yeah, that's a great question, Rachel. Do we anticipate any data interruptions or discontinuations due to changes at the federal level? We're all kind of in the dark a bit about that. The Trump administration did take down the social vulnerability index data for a couple weeks because they said it promoted extreme gender ideology. So a federal judge had them put that data back up onto their website. But yeah, it's something that we're watching. We do have all of FEMA's historic data, downloaded, so we'll continue to have access to it and be able to publish it for our residents, regardless of what happens going forward. But it definitely is a question of, if there are changes to FEMA, how will that kind of play out in terms of data availability? And Patricia asked, during saltwater intrusions, there were water distribution centers. Is information updated with every event? So yeah, we obviously, luckily, we dodged the bullet with the saltwater intrusion in the New Orleans area. So, but we would be launching dashboards if saltwater intrusion led to a disaster where individual assistance was being given out. So, we do expect that we would do that going forward. And I'll say also, ViaLink on our website, I know that resource availability is always a big question, and ViaLink has other tools on our website during disasters that map the availability of resources. So we had a big kind of dashboard map up during Hurricane Ida that at one point was tracking like 700 different resources around the state of food distribution sites and cooling centers and whatnot. So that's a really valuable tool, I think, to people that it's not posted now on our website because there's obviously no disaster. But normally, if you go to viewlink.org, there's a header at the top that says, like, click here to see resources, and that's something that that can help people out. The question, is it mobile friendly? Yep, you can access these dashboards through mobile devices. They're definitely better viewed on a laptop, but you can access them on your phone. You'll just be having to like zoom in and really be manipulating the filters by hand. Okay, well, it looks like for now, I'm going to put my email address in the chat. Happy to always, we love talking data at ViaLink, so happy to, if you guys have any other questions or ideas you have about ways that we can improve these tools, or if you're, as I said, interested in starting to use dashboards yourself, then we're happy to build out that capacity. Or if you want to, as I said, I'm the president of the Louisiana VOAD, so if you want to talk any more about that, then would love to chat about that. But otherwise, thank you all so much. Thank you for your interest in the data and for all the work that all the organizations are doing here to serve the people of Louisiana. So with that, we'll wrap it up, and I will send out this PowerPoint to everyone who attended. So thanks so much.